One more question. You used the term lightening of being, which you borrowed essentially from Max Weber, the idea of rationalization and standardization of society. Now, I was struck by one thing. When Weber talks about rationalization, he's talking about a system of authority. And in the pluralization that we see in mass society, we also see the authority system dissolving, becoming weaker. But there are a lot of people in the Frankfurt School made the observation that the authority structure really becomes anonymous, that you don't require anything of individuals except what is self-evident in terms of opinion polls and that kind of stuff. How do you reconcile the sort of weakening of thought on the one hand, which is anti-authoritarian, and then this rationalization process which makes power anonymous?
By the way, when I mention Weber, I don't assume that I interpret him completely and faithfully. I mean, I take the idea of modernization as a rationalization which involves a sort of dissolution of the centralities. In a sense, also bureaucracy is this sort of multiplication of a network in which it is more and more difficult to recognize the heart, the chief point, and so on. I think that Weber had still a sort of demonizing attitude in relation to that. He was not very content with the bureaucratization, which is better than traditional power, in his opinion, but it involves risks. Now, I think that, and the Frankfurt School, in a sense, continues this idea of, even more, of course, than Weber, mistrust of what rationalization means. Well, as to Weber, I think that he remains within a sort of irrationalistic attitude of the beginning of the century. Weber could be considered a good interpreter of Nietzsche, for instance, for many reasons. The Frankfurt School is still dominated by an ideal of subjectivity which is, again, modeled on Hegel's self-transparency, reappropriation, and so on. So I don't agree with the criticism of modern rationalization based upon this ideal of subjectivity as reappropriating subject. I try to see in the in the dissolution of the power system into an anonymous bureaucratic network also some positive implications. I was confronted, often in Italy one is confronted with the idea that, well, fascism was bad, but also this democracy in which we are dominated by commercials is bad. But nobody would like to go back to fascism from the commercials. So which is the difference? The difference is that as far as the authority and power depersonalize themselves, become anonymous, objective, functional relations. Of course, there is still some authoritarian character in society of this kind, but it's infinitely better than that. And there is also a possibility that the power itself has a vocation to dissolve. There is a paradoxical experience in Italy which may be cited as an example, I don't know, because it's very ambiguous, but in Italy, much of what happens positively in terms of economy and so on is made despite the structure of the power, not in virtue of the power, not against it, but we have a sort of strange latent system of compensation which makes that really the governability of the system is very low. But the system works nevertheless, at taking advantage of this dysfunctioning of the power system. So the idea that I have in mind is that the Weberian development of the bureaucratization may also involve sort of possibilities of skipping away, of how do you call glissé in glittering, escaping the power by the way of sort of lateral, not by taking the power as in Russian Revolution. And this idea was always in my mind when I confronted with the Italian terrorists in the 70s. They wanted to hit the heart of the power. But the heart of there is no heart of the power. If it's there, the power is over there, and so on. This is not simply a way of self-defense of the power. It's also a way of diminishing the imposiveness of the power on us. So, again, it is not a necessary process, but it is a chance which neither Frankfurt School nor Weber in the classic sense had understood, maybe, in my opinion, because of philosophical prejudice, because of an insufficient critique of the traditional idea of metaphysical being, of metaphysical subjectivity, and so on and so forth.